Hi, everybody. Welcome to our afternoon panel on algo literacy and the Crossover Project. I think we've all had an awful lot of time now speaking about journalism and talking about media literacy, and we're now pivoting across to algo literacy. And before we start, I would like to have a raise of hands of who here has worked with algorithm literacy already. Okay. And who here has worked with media literacy? Okay. And how about journalists in the room? And students? Cool. Excellent. Excellent. Any AI students? Nobody in AI. Okay, good. Fine. So I'm the moderator today. My name is Juliana von Reppert-Bismarck. I am the founder and executive director of a news literacy organization called Lie Detectors. I don't know if many of you were in the last session where we had a discussion about that. And I have the very great pleasure to be moderating this panel, which is treating something that I think is extremely new and extremely important. And I have two speakers with me today. We have, I have to tell you that unfortunately, it's been fixed. Nothing's happened. Okay, so if you're looking at your program, you'll see there have been some changes, but we have a really good panel today, which is Divina Frau-Meggs, who is Professor for Information and Communication Sciences at the Sorbonne Nouvelle in France. She is the co-chair of GapMill at the UNESCO, which is about media literacy. And she's also the president, and I believe founder, of Savoir Devenir, which is also a media literacy organization. And we also have Nelly Payeux, who is a journalist and founder of an organization based in Finland that is called Check First. And Check First provides tools to fact checkers. And Nelly and Divina have been working together on the Crossover Project. So I'm really pleased to be starting this. Excellent, take a seat. My own question to Divina is this. Full disclosure, I've known Divina for a really long time, and what I've known about Divina is that she's been working in media literacy, and we've had very long conversations about this. So my question to you is, why, after decades, really, in media literacy, why are you now working on algorithm literacy? Before we even go into the detail of your project, why is algorithm literacy important, and why is it important now?
I was not trying to avoid the question, I promise. But I'm very pleased to be here with you too, because Julianne is also somebody who, though young in the field of media and information literacy, has done a lot of catching up and speeding us up. Thank you. And in fact, it's true, I am the oldest here, by far. In real age, you have to Google my age. I'm not going to tell it to you. But I have been in this field since 1985. Are you impressed? Yes, I hope so. Why 1985 is because that's when I started getting into education, teaching, not really media education. But I had been at Stanford University. And that experience there, at the time when Stanford was not very well known, for me was life-changing. Because at Stanford, the only thing they were talking about was liberating information. Liberating information. And it didn't mean at all what I thought liberating information was. I thought it was about freeing journalists from jails. No, they were freeing information from archives, from libraries, and putting it out there. And their idea was a naive idea of emancipation. And of course, as a French person who believes in emancipation, which is the best word, better even than empowerment, I was tempted by that. So this is how I started. And turns out that at the global level, UNESCO had produced a declaration just 2 or 3 years before the Grunwald Declaration in 1982, 85, where it was becoming obvious that media were not what they used to be, they were here to stay, and they were going to develop in something called the internet. And here I was in France, where in fact at my university we had a computer behind a heavy stainless steel door where we never went, to the point that one day the stainless steel door fell on the computer. So I was in between two cultures, Stanford, 10,000 micros in the classroom, my university, one computer crushed by a steel door. I still have a feeling sometimes I'm in that situation. So I'm doing algo-literacy, the Stanford, freeing information, etc., and I'm dealing with crushed hopes. The crushed hopes of young people. I'm very pleased there's a lot of young people here. It makes me feel younger. Because I'm telling myself how to liberate you guys and girls from a system of education that is antiquated and that has been designed in the 19th century. So I'm using media and information literacy as a time bomb that I'm placing in all your minds. And I hope that it will blow as a flower. A flower that is like the one we've designed for UNESCO, which is a composite flower, where all the types of supports, video, paper, computer, internet, games, etc., are part of this composite definition we have of media and information literacy. Because what's at the core of a flower, what holds it together, is information. Then the blooms are going to appear in very different shapes. And some of you are going to specialize in video, others in podcast, others in etc., etc. And that's the blooming. That's what media and information literacy is about. And that will eventually change the school system and the university system. You just have to stick in there long enough. Voila. So, algo-literacy is one of those petals, one of those blooms. It is part of media and information literacy. I'll try to convince you of that as we go. But to me, it is keeping the flowers seeded, taking into account the future and future-proofing media and information literacy. I don't know if I've answered. No.
And can you say a little bit about, because Davina has been on an expert process that went on for a year. And in this process, you worked with a group of experts, including lie detectors, in which we thought to ourselves, how is it that we can create resilience among young people to disinformation and to polarization? How can we make them media literate and digitally literate and into full digital citizens? Can you say a little bit about how, why you think that algorithm literacy needs to be in those guidelines that we've just published? And they were, and it was also thanks to Davina that we agreed, in fact, that algorithm literacy should be something that teachers also pay attention to when they talk to children about the information universe. Do you want to say something about how that filtered in and why you think this belongs in with all of the with these guidelines that we just published?
So the good news about change, it's true that it's changing at the high level of the EU, which with the hope that it will trickle down. And for the first time ever, DG EAC, which is our super duper Ministry of Education, has tackled the idea of digital literacy. Up to now, it was DG Connect, the DG of Employment and digital society. So this shift is a very good shift, because it means that educators, trainers, teachers are starting to realize we cannot motivate young people anymore if we don't move into the digital. And what we did, and Julianne was my accomplice here, we tweaked digital literacy to being digital media literacy. Because if you look at what is the digital, really, it's just a ton of media, just many more media with interactivity added, you know. So they accepted that, more or less. And so we told them it is becoming clearer and clearer that the digital is driven by data and by algorithms. And so we said its information is also shaped and reshaped by data, so you have to know a little bit about it. And with media and information literacy, we are not talking about coding. We are not into computing. That's for computer scientists, and it's totally okay. We are in the decoding. We are in the uses and practices that we all have in our everyday life, because that's what we need it for. Among you, maybe, among the population of any country, 5% of people become computer scientists. Let me reassure you, 5% become journalists. So you're peer-to-peer. So what we convinced them that knowing about algorithms, knowing about data and the users and misuses of data and algorithms was important. And we put that in the document. And one of the things we tried to push, and it's the first time in any country, we said, yes, media and digital literacies are transversal. You can do that in the French class, you can do that in the history class, you can do that in the math class. Fine. But if you don't do it as a class by itself, if you don't teach about media and education, media and information literacy by itself, you are never going to evaluate it. Teachers are never going to feel legitimate doing it. Parents are going to say, what's this? You're losing time, it's not in the program. Decision makers are going to say, you can't prove us that it works, so why should we fund it? You hear the traditional anthem of that. So one way to fight that is to say, yes, it's transversal, but it should be, and it should be, not but, and it should be something that you can teach per se, with its own program, etc. And so that's where we are. Now, this document has recommendations and guidelines. Each country has to digest it. France, for instance, has made it now compulsory at all levels to have media literacy as a transversal discipline, not as a discipline per se, but this is the next frontier. And algo literacy, we hope, is going to break that barrier, make people, just suddenly keel over and just adopt it, to be followed.
Great, thank you. And it's not uncontroversial, because it is actually directly addressing the fact that one of the big problems we face is that we are all dealing with filtered versions of reality. We're stuck in our silos. Those silos are curated and handed to us by processes that we perhaps don't fully understand. I don't know how many of you were in the previous session, but we were talking a little bit about the cognitive psychological effect of people being aware of why they might be being targeted by something, and they become more resilient to the content that they are receiving if they understand why they're receiving it, that they might have preferences, and this is speaking to one of the preferences that has been recorded about them. At Lie Detectors, we're huge fans of the Crossover Project, because I would like to now go from the general topic of algorithm literacy and speak very specifically about the Crossover Project, which is the practical implementation of the realization just how important it is to make people aware that they are receiving this filtered reality, and to do that in a playful and really engaging way. I'm a massive fan of Crossover. We recommend it to the journalists that we work with, and we also recommend it to the teachers that we work with, because it is so easy to use, and it is such a nice, there's a game element in it that has been very, very nicely received. So maybe, Nelly, you can tell us a little bit about what crossover looks like and how it works. And
Thank you. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the crossover project. Can you hear me? Oh, great. Okay, first of all, good afternoon, everyone. I'm really, really happy to be here, and thank you for attending the presentation. I'm going to indeed talk to you about the Crossover project, which is an EU-funded project which started in December 2021, so almost a year now. My name is Nelly Payeux. I'm a journalist by training and co-founder of Check First, which was introduced before. And for the Crossover project, we act as a tech provider, and we have the immense pleasure to work with EU Disinfolab, which is a Brussels-based NGO tackling disinformation, Apache, which is an investigative Dutch-speaking media outlet who do a really, really great job and have a fantastic team of journalists, and Savoir Devenir and the whole team of Divina. So the Crossover project is focusing on 7 platforms recommendation algorithms. So it's YouTube Search and Suggest, Twitter Trends, Odyssey. Do you guys know Odyssey? If I say Odyssey, does that ring a bell? Okay, I will maybe come back to that later. Facebook, so Facebook public pages and groups. Google Search, Google Autocomplete Prediction actually, which is the system that basically allows you to complete your sentence when you are typing something in Google search bar, Reddit Hotpost, and Google News. And the project is, for now, only focusing on Belgium, but we are really looking to expand it to other countries. What you need to know about recommendation algorithm, and that's why I'm really happy that you are here, is because it's a big word that might be scary, but it's pretty much simple to understand how it works, even if we don't know much about them. Recommendation algorithms are responsible for displaying when you type a search. So when you are looking for something, the recommendation algorithms are responsible, for example, for the order of video you are going to see when you type something on YouTube, or as I said, to the autocompletion system on Google. But also, recommendation algorithms are responsible for just displaying the trends that you might see on Twitter, on YouTube, or the reels that are suggested on Instagram, for example. When we started the project, we had to collect data. And in order to collect data, we had to collect them from the official platform's API. So we collected them from YouTube API, Twitter API, all the API you can see on the screen, knowing that CrowdTangle is the API for Facebook. But the API is basically what the platforms gives you and what they do want to give you, to give researchers, to give developers, to lead projects on their platforms. And if you are a good journalist, you know that you have to cross-check your sources to be sure and not to have a single point of data collection or a single witness for a paper. So we wondered also if the official API data were corroborated by the user experience. What you see on the screen, is that really what Twitter tells us that you see on the screen? That was the question. And we also wanted to monitor services which didn't have any official APIs, because otherwise that would have been so much too easy. So we deployed a network of small computers, which are called Raspberry Pis, and we created a software user simulation system running on that small computers, and we plugged them in volunteers' house in every Belgian region. It allowed us to compare the data that were provided by the API and also capture the data the same way, the exact same way a user would see them. Those data, when they are collected, they are displayed in a dashboard, which you can find on, which is publicly available on dashboard.crossover.social. On the dashboard, a user can select dates. So we started collecting data, I think, at the beginning of the year, a time, platform, so among the 7 I just cited before, a data source, so either the official APIs or the small computers, the Raspberry Pis, a language, because as the project is focusing on Belgium, we work in French and Dutch. It allows, for example, to see what are the trending topics on Twitter in Belgium, the evolution in time, whether the tweet is promoted or not, and what was its position before. It's also enabled to see when you would type a keyword on YouTube, for example, Russia, what videos would be suggested, what videos would come afterwards, etc., etc. To illustrate that, let's take an example of how we worked for the Crossover project and mostly how it enabled us to spot in what extent this information was pushed forwards to their users. So our last example in dates, for this one, we are going to talk about Google autocomplete suggestion. So as I said, Google autocomplete suggestion is the system that allows you to finish your sentence when you are typing something on Google. Google autocomplete suggestion has no official APIs, which raises questions about accountability and transparency on the system, because basically what we know about Google recommendation algorithm and autocomplete suggestion feeder is just what they communicate about in their blog post and what they want to tell people about, but they don't have any data point that enables us, that would enable to have a public access to that. It is also important to note that Google represents 86% of the desktop searches in 2021 on google.com and google.be, and Google welcomes 98.3 million visits per month. As I said, what we need to know about Google autocomplete feature is that it's an automated system that generates prediction that helps people save time by allowing them to quickly complete, the search they already intended to do. That's in a nutshell what we know about how it works and the autocomplete suggestion feature. So we are back in February 2022. The war is beginning in Ukraine, and journalists are starting to pronouncing new words people never heard of before, words such as, I don't know, Mariupol, Bucha, Donbass, and Belgian users, as a lot of people, when they don't know what a word means, they are going to Google it. Oops. So we see a rise in the interest in the research for the keyword Donbass, for example. Now, the question we ask is, what would the autocomplete feature suggest when a Belgian user would type Donbass in their Google search bar? I don't know if it's still the case, but you can try it on your phone. Just type Donbass in Google search bar and see what you would be suggested with. But it seems like between February and September 2022, Google would suggest the term insider associated to Donbass. Does anyone know what Donbass Insider is? Okay. Donbass Insider is a pro-Kremlin media outlet, which was founded in 2016 by Christelle Néant, which is accused basically of spreading misinformation about the situation in Ukraine and about the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. And if you were a French-speaking user of Google in Belgium, between February and September, you almost had 100% of chance to be suggested with the word insider associated to Donbass. And it's not like it was suggested, you know, when you type something, you have several autocomplete suggestions. It was not like in the last position. It was in the first position, the first recommendation. And it was the case, so this is for one of our Raspberry Pis, but we tried to do that on every small computer we had in Belgium. And it was the case for every computer we had. So it was the case everywhere in Belgium. So in a nutshell, a Belgian user typing Donbass was presented with a search prediction pointing to a very dubious source of information, which is Donbass Insider. But on the other autocomplete suggestion you had Donbass Insider YouTube, because they had a YouTube channel. You have Donbass Insider Odyssey. Odyssey is a decentralized, is a new form of video hosting, which is decentralized, if I want to say it quickly. You had Donbass Anne-Laure Bonnel. Anne-Laure Bonnel was also accused of spreading a pro-Russian vision of the conflict in Donbass. And you have Donbass Insider Christelle, which refers to Christelle Néant, who is the founder of Donbass Insider and who worked previously before founding Donbass Insider in Doni, which is also a pro-Russian press agency. Now, when we saw that, we also wanted to check if it was only the case in Belgium. But as we couldn't deploy our little Raspberry Pis everywhere in Europe, we tried with virtual private networks, with VPNs. And we realized that you can't really see because it's really small, but it's the case in the United Kingdom, in Portugal, Germany, Belgium, and it was the case in France too. We reached out to Google and sent them an email saying, hey, it seems like the machine is broken. They're responding us by sending us blog posts, basically. They just responded to me. I sent the email, and they're just responding to me by saying, hey, yeah, this is how autocomplete works, and that's it. And we responded by saying, yeah, okay, but it was not what we asked. We asked, was it on purpose? And how come is a pro-Kremlin media outlet recommended to Belgian users and actually to millions of users all around Europe in the context of a war, in the context where disinformation is very, very present at that time? And they just responded to us by sending blog posts when they were called out about this behavior. So that's basically what the last investigation we lead for the crossover project, and how we work with algorithm and how we try to understand what they do. We also lead investigations before that when we realized, for example, that morning when we woke up, we saw on the dashboard that on every small computer we had, there was the keyword Nazis associated with anti-Semitic content trending on Twitter. We could see that on our little computers, but we couldn't see that on the APIs. So that raises the question of it means that if you have people who are working with the Twitter API, they wouldn't have that kind of data which would be retrieved to them. We also realized, for example, for the YouTube algorithm, when people were looking for the keyword Russia on YouTube, before Russia Today was banned in Europe, they were quite successful actually on YouTube. They had a lot of views and they had a lot of people who were watching their videos, especially on the war in Ukraine. Then they were banned, so people couldn't access their content. Well, their content was not suppressed, but people couldn't access the content anymore if their IP address were geolocated in Europe. And so it's kind of left a void in the algorithm. And soon we started to see another actor appearing on the scene, which was CGTN. CGTN is a China Global Television Network. It's the state media channel of China. So it means that YouTube's, well, it means, I don't know, but for that case, the YouTube recommendation algorithm replaced a state media with another one on the topic of the war in Ukraine. And before that, CGTN has like 200 views on their videos. And now it's very funny to see that they have like more than 10,000 views on videos about Russia, but on almost all other videos, they have like 200 or 300 views, which is very few. I'm happy to answer any question and give the floor to Divina for the algo literacy part, which is going to be at the core of this presentation, and to answer any question afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Nele. And maybe we'll take all questions in the round, because this filters into what has been turned into the mill kit, what is actually something that outside users can then actually use and learn from and play with. And Divina's going to show us how that works just in a minute. So this is going from the research and from making sure what Nelly just showed us being how they gathered and made sure that their work is based on evidence and based on actual data, and now turning this into a literacy type project.
Trying to make sure. No, il me laisse pas sortir. This is when I'm having a problem with sharing my screen. There. Up. This is not the beginning, sorry. You're going to see everything first. Okay. Yeah, so you heard Nelly. It's fascinating. It's incredible storytelling. And then we have to recoup that. And in the project, we were supposed to produce our first algo literacy stuff 3 months into the project. And by the 4th and 5th months, we were still struggling. How do we say this to teachers if we don't understand it ourselves? And this is typically the case of today's literacies. This is true for climate literacy. It's true for ocean literacy. And this is why this is a very interesting moment, is that we are all dealing with new kinds of knowledge. And we're all dealing with uncertainty of that knowledge. And it's knowledge in the making. But we can't give up, right? There are emergencies, and there are people who are actually working on it. We're in a very good position. We have people like Nelly, we have Disinfolab, a lot of journalists and researchers who've launched themselves into that. And so on the receiving end of teachers and users, we also have to negotiate that. And what's interesting about media and information literacy is that we've always worked with others. It's never a teacher alone in the classroom. It's never a youth worker alone with kids. It's always, who is in the media? Who can come and tell us? And how do we recuperate that? And this dialogue breaks the barriers, the fourth barrier of this classroom. In a classroom, teachers are locked with the students and the traditional classroom. It was for students' protections in the past, but you can see how with screens, we're breaking the fourth wall. By bringing people in who never come to the classroom before, we're also breaking the wall. And that's what matters, is to get into this mood of listening, not being sure we understand, being extremely tolerant to uncertainty, extremely tolerant to error. And the team at the team at Check First, at Disinfolab, and were very tolerant of us and of our ignorance, and we claimed ignorance. We need to come back to you, we need, etc. So we came to this project with our own research, prior discussions with teachers, and what did they tell us in our prior research projects where we were using also things like InVid, which is a plugin that allows you to see fake videos. They were telling us, don't give us the dashboard that you saw. Yeah, it's beautiful. She knows how to use it. And they're training journalists for that. But the teachers were telling us, we are not professionals. I mean, we're not professionals of that. We don't have the time. We don't have the training. Actually, we don't have the energy to go and do all of that. So, okay, fine, we're here. What we can do is, if you give us examples, if you give us ready-made lesson plans, then, yes, we'll know when to plug it. We'll know, I have 2 hours and I can get the kids on this, or I have a 6-week work that I can do with a librarian, or some parent is coming in and he's a journalist and I can, see what I mean? The teachers are opportunists and you have to play on that opportunism. So give us easy to use, ready-made, this is something. And we don't trust each other as teachers to explain this. So do bring in outsiders, do bring in the journalist, do bring in the developer, do come in as Savoir Devenir, etc., and do it with us, because you're independent, and so we know that it's not something that is biased or that is too much set into program expectations, when none of this is in a program. And allow us feedback, which is to say, we'd like to talk back to you. If something is not clear, we want a chat box kind of system. We want relays. We want to feedback on you, and maybe we can help. And actually, in the previous project we have, and you can find it on Savoir Devenir website called You Verify, the teachers improved the plugin of Agence France Presse, okay, with their feedback. And the developers were listening, and the way Nelly and her team are listening. And they may not change things right away, but it will sink in. And so this idea that we're actually a lot of people working together, this distributed intelligence, for me, that's what liberating information is about. None of us has the information for himself or herself alone. But if we come together, we're going to crack it. We crack the code, but we crack the decode also. And so that was a part of the challenge, okay? So then we had to tell teachers, no panic. This is not a new field, okay? You're not going to have to acquire yet one more thing. The question that Julianne was saying, why are you putting algo literacy under media and information literacy? Well, because if we tell them it's something new, it's a new course, it's a new competence, teachers are going to be feeling but they can't manage, okay? And so what they express to us when we talk about algo literacy is they say, we can't teach it, very low confidence. We're not trained, we are, it's complicated, nobody's doing it out there. We researchers can't even give them valid scales to evaluate where you start And as Nelly, I think, brilliantly showed you, algorithms are tricky and they're not transparent and they try to hide. And when you talk to Google and et cetera, they tell you, we don't control them anymore. As we say in French, y a-t-il un pilote dans l'avion? And the answer is no. At least that's what they say. Right, Nelly? Which is to say, they tell us the machine learning is such that AI improves AI without necessarily asking permission for humans. Dealing with uncertainty, remember? And being tolerant to that and not quitting. That's basically where we are. And the answer of Google to, okay, well, here is our blog spot, and deal with it. That's the real situation. And what Check First and us did is say, we can't change them. This is not our role. Our regulators may change the industry, may change Google, etc. We're just on the user end of things. And so we should deal with it as a user, right? And do as they did. What do users see? And from there, how can we curate, control, master, filter, change our behavior? See? Play with the algorithm instead of trying to look under the hood, and the hood is dark. So that's the discussion before we meet these guys and while we meet these guys. And we look at research before us also in algoliteracy, and there are definitions out there, great. The definitions are not very clear, but they have things that we can hook on from a perspective of media and information literacy. The idea that first you have to be aware that algorithms are there and they are producing results. And lots of people don't think so. They think when they get a result on Google, that's it. That's the truth. Everybody's seeing the same thing. So already just starting to know that, so it's hugely liberating. Then the idea that maybe you can get a few skills to cope with that and finesse the kind of influence they're trying on you. Play with it. Oh, you think that because I wanted a trip to Bali, I'm always going to want to go to Bali. Well, guess what? Now I'm going to Croatia. See what happens. This kind of thing. And then, as we always do in media literacy, once you start understanding, change your behavior. Change your behavior. So that's our approach. So we looked also at competence frameworks, as we were mentioning with Julian. The EU is working with us on this. They've changed the DigiComp 2.2. If you go online, DigiComp 2.2 now has added data literacy. So examples of disinformation and how it happens. And so for teachers to tell them, you know, there's a body out there who's thought about it, competence frameworks exist. When you do something, you can tell the parents, I am doing this, it's a competence, it's been described, it's legitimate. All of these elements have to be brought together when you speak to the teachers, because they don't speak to these guys on a normal basis, but they speak with competence inspectors, directors of their departments, of their schools, parents who are very, very, very intrusive. My parents never went to my school. Now you have parents who will come almost at the end of each class saying to the teacher, why did you do that? This doesn't correspond to the values. This is not in the program. And others who are going to say, this is shaitan. And then you're in trouble. So this is the reality of parents. The safety of teachers is very important. It's something we put in that in those guidelines, safety of teachers. So we have to provide them with competences, criteria, things that can be proved and are not value-laden in the sense of we are going to teach them against Russia or whatever. We are not in the ideology battle here. We are understanding why suddenly Donbass Insider appears. It's not us doing that. It's the system, the algorithms doing that. Understanding. And of course, we try to translate that into something, you know, the DigiComp, if you look at them, is 235 examples. Deadly. So we try to transform that into sort of a 5 or 6 dimensions for teachers to know what it is in reality. And this is, if I had to define algoliteracy, and this is what it is. You update your culture, you look at the distribution, the amplification, you control your personal choices. This is where we are going, that's education. We make informed decisions, we look at the biases, and we share. You do not keep it for yourself. That's one tenet, contrasted to the individualistic approach of a school that the 21st century schools have to do. We are sharing. And we have all the tools, the social media to share. And we don't always share bullshit. We can share quality information, we can share quality counter-narratives, etc., etc. So share, if you care, as we say in some of our projects. So now comes the moment when we bring everybody together, check first, etc. So I'm not insisting on that one. The dashboard, you know it by heart now, thanks to Nelly, so I'm gaining time. And so they tell us that regularly, and then we start telling ourselves, oh my God, this is so complicated, and I hope you were in that situation when Nelly was explaining. It's wonderful, it's clear now, but when I get out of here, how do I continue, right? And this is where falling back on very traditional media literacy principles for school design, for intervention design, is very useful. So a modular approach. Modular means we break down into snippets, nuggets of information. Here I can do a competence that is about recommendation. Here I can do a nugget on this is how a hashtag works. This is a definition of algorithm. Making it modular because, again, you don't know when the teacher is going to feel the need to say, oh, today I need the definition. Tomorrow I want this example, etc. So it has to be broken up in a very modular way. So it's not programmatic. There's a beginning and an end, and if you missed some steps, you're out. This is very scary for a teacher when you tell them, you've missed those 2 or 3 steps, and therefore you're out. It's scary for everybody. So, but instead of saying that, you say, this is where you are, you've done all of this. Well, if you bring this brick, you're going to move 1 step. You cannot tell a teacher, this is it, we're giving you the document, and you're going to be up here. Have you tried to go upstairs 5 at a time? Yeah. 1 at a time, maybe 2. Okay? And this is the mindset in which you have to approach novelty, innovation, etc. Is break it into ways that it's 1 step more. Because once you've done the first step, you've built your confidence, you are unstoppable. And all of you who've done media literacy, you know that, right? How do I dare, do I dare, do I dare? And then you've done the first step, the rewards are so amazing, right, Julianne? You keep building those steps, and the teachers keep following. So that is key, modular, modular, modular. Always situations that are experience-based, related to you, related to the journalist. She invited you to type Donbass. I've seen some of you doing it. Perfect. Because it's on this thing, seeing what the predictions are doing, that you're going to tell yourself, hang on, there's something here. You're hooked. Your curiosity is there. So real-life experiences, sometimes toxic experiences, and being trapped in a bubble well, fine. You're going to be able to use that in your everyday life. You're going to transfer that knowledge right away. The competences, because it's important to put words, and competences put words. You control, you master, you share, etc. Putting words on your actions is also an empowering thing. We are always explicit in phenomena that are very complex and implicit. Secrecy, lack of transparency is always implicit. They can't give you the words. They don't give you the code. We do the reverse engineering. We give the words, and we put words on phenomena, etc. So that's the spirit, if you want. So it's being active, critical, and of course we stay on uses and practices, and always, but that's savoir devenir, but that's also Europe, the School of Media Literacy in Europe. We add values. It's about your dignity. It's about your right to know, your right to participate. It's about freedom of opinion and expression. It's about journalists, freedom of expression. Okay? So, yes, these come like that. When you stop doing that, journalists are killed, media literacy teachers are killed. We had Samuel Paty in France. So, if you stop transmitting values, you stop a lot of important things. So what modular set did we try to create? We went for podcasts because we'd never done it. So there's always a little element of risk in media literacy. Well, I'm going to try this tool. I have never used Calameo, so I'm going to use Calameo. Whatever. So we did podcasts, again, based on interviews of these guys, the journalists, them, a media literacy expert always to remind everybody, sorry, of the competences at work there, etc. We use the real articles produced by Apache on their findings, like, for instance, the YouTube addiction, which was quite striking. We produce quizzes where we hid the knowledge base. And we made it playful, but they're independent, they're interactive. You can start with that if you want, if you have 10 minutes. And then we proposed to teachers workshops. Remember, they wanted ready-made tools. And we know that once they have ready-made tools, they'll transform them, but it gives them the security to go maybe the second step. So workshop plans where we put everything, the script of the podcast and suggestions of how to use it for debate in the classroom, etc. The actual article, because it's good for the young kids to go and read good press, good habits, the responses, the answers to the quizzes in the database, etc. So the teachers have all these things, but students can have it too. Transparency there. And so we molded ourselves on the reality of Nelly and of Apache. The choices they made of articles, what was most striking to them, we took as most striking for us. Which is why, remember, this is why we were behind them. We had to be behind to let them make sense of what they were discovering. And I hope you heard in Nelly how it is a spirit of inquiry that is directing her. We asked ourselves a question. We wanted to know if, this is the mood. We don't necessarily have the answer, but we have a question. And we go for the question until we crack it. So the first one was our very most illuminating one because it was very optimistic. We were all terrified at the idea that Brussels was going to be conquered by truckers. Convoi de la Liberté, and they were telling us on the dashboard, it's trending. This is going to be as big as Canada. Remember? So real life experience, etc. And what we discovered, and what Apache discovered, going really on the spot, is that it was a bust. It was a bubble that burst, and there was no big movement. We are actually talking to each other. Brussels has not been conquered, right? So what we were able to show here is that the algorithms were playing the ranking and putting that hashtag very high, but there was a mismatch with reality. So the possibility that there are mismatches was interesting and was pedagogical in itself and reassuring in a way. It means you don't have to be a prisoner of a bubble. It's very important to have real journalists really going on the ground to see what really happened. See all the messages that we can send, but are actually very reassuring in front of this angst about this toxic disinformation stuff. So that was the first one. And that was some of the basics. Then the second one was about the dangerous liaisons, as we call them, and which is to say, you don't have RT Russia, let's go to China. Okay, let's go to where there is the most propaganda in the Russian context. Clearly not the rest, but so clearly an objective alliance maybe between the two ways of proceeding. Definitely the algorithm reading it the same way. And what it tells us in terms of recommendation and the propaganda. And then the next two ones, we used something that is very important for us in media literacy, which is reflexivity. Thinking about what we've learned, how we've learned it, what it tells us. And so we asked the journalist, how did this algo-journalism, we actually coined the word algo-journalism, algo-literacy, algo-journalism, how does this algo-journalism change your job? Which is a question that you have to ask all of you. Algorithms are changing the way we work, the way we teach, the way we, etc. So what happens with journalists? So we have journalists telling us about that around an article on Odyssey, which we all discovered. Odyssey, that I think, I don't know if it's you or Hind who called it the YouTube of the extreme right. Is it you? No, so then it's Hind. And then the last module, we asked the developers, what they learned, what was their experience with the dashboard, and you see how Nelly is interacting with it and giving us the narrative about that. Huh? And we call it the narrative watcher, because in a way they are being watchdogs, just the traditional way. Yeah? There. And so we organize ways of discussing it with others. I'm going to go fast because we need time to discuss with you, but you can find this on the Crossover social point. You see the podcast, you see the worksheets, you see the quiz. You can go on also on Savoir Devenir. Huh? And then that way we could really take the competences framework and applying it into the situation. We call it AIR, fresh air. Analyze, interpret, react. The sharing part, the changing your behavior part, we reinforced this. This is a boring one, so I'm not going to develop it, but we're going back to research, we're going back to theorizing what is happening, and I call this transliteracy, because you're having to deal with media, the newspapers, you're having to deal with documents, Google search is bringing up documents, they can be videos or whatever, and you're dealing with data. This is the new competences of the 21st century. This is the ones you have to acquire. And so now you have to bring that out in the public scene. Continue pushing for algo literacy in teacher training. Define more and more, refine this early framework, and you can see how tentative it is. But tolerance to error, probably we've made mistakes. Who cares? We're trying to provide something. Providing ready-to-use, easy-to-use examples, and as a result, making sure that you as citizens, not just users, as citizens are going to support all the things we've been here today about the Media Freedom Act, etc., which is to say transparency of algorithms, making them be as clear as possible, but at the same time telling them, you know what, we've also figured you out and we are changing our users anyways. So sending this message clearly to the platforms. There we are. Thank you for your attention.
1, 2. Oh, yeah, great. I just wanted to add precision to what Divina and what I just said before, is that I am a journalist by training. I do research now. I am not a developer at all. I'm not a geek at all. I don't know anything in IT. And we work on transparency and of algorithm because we believe it's important to be transparent and for people to have access to data. But more than that, I don't care how the algorithm works. We don't care how the algorithm works. Well, Divina and the MIL team cares because they have to explain it to people, but I mean, I don't care. But the idea also of the project is to make the platforms accountable. Why do they displace that kind of content? Do not explain to me how it works. I want to know how come the algorithm displays that kind of content.
Thank you. And with that, I think it would be time to come to your questions. Please raise your hand if you've got a question either for Divina or Nelly. Go for it. And maybe you can say what your profession is and.
Voilà. So thank you, everyone. Sorry for my English. It will be a long time since I've made a question in English. So I'm in computer sciences a bit, and there is a part in your exposé that I haven't heard, and I'm a bit sad. It's about commitment. So I don't want to advocate for Google or for other GAFAs, but when they tell you that they don't have the control over the algorithm, I quite understand that when you make something that push engaging content in first, at the time we are living in, the worse the worst content that you can find on the internet comes first, because there's nothing more that drives commitments more that excessive point of view, or you can see that in politics or in other range of matters. But so is there a facet in your program that push the fact that young people should be more committed to share good news? Because when I see, for example, the 7 points, because I'm reading some Russian propaganda sometimes just to see what they're telling the people, and you can be a Russian, read that and say, yeah, I'm the good part. I'm the good part of the barrier. I don't know. It's exactly what I'm doing. I'm reading a lot of sources. I'm creating it, but they live in their own information world, in their silos. China is identical. So, how do you deal with that? How do you make people push for the fact that the algorithm have a better article to put in first? You understand that well? Okay.
You'll complete me. Yes, well, actually, you're welcome to come and talk with us about this part too. But two things. You're right, and I think Nelly will explain it better. It's true that we, from a media literacy perspective, we wanted to find them guilty. We wanted to say they're bad, these algorithms there. And they kept telling us, no, they are not necessarily pushing disinformation. So, you have to accept to hear that, but it's because you're speaking with the specialists that suddenly your own stereotype or whatever the buzz on TV and radio has been telling you about algorithms, suddenly you tell yourself, hang on, I'm moving too fast on algorithms, and maybe we should concentrate, and it's true, and this is where I'm going, on quality information and ensuring that this is happening. This means a dialogue with platforms, which is what we have engaged. Julian and I were in another task force, decidedly, the one on online disinformation, where we pushed for the guidelines for the platforms and the transparency guidelines. It's a beginning, they're not perfect, but it means we have to keep finding ways of engaging the platforms and making the platforms comply. In France, the word we have is making the platforms be loyal to democracy, be loyal in what they do, in their transparency, in telling us what they rank, de-rank, etc., etc. So this is now taking another word that the French and the Canadians have coined, which would be a strategy to push, as you say, some quality information that is not necessarily by angst, by emotions, by fear. It's called discoverability, découvrabilité. Découvrabilité is being built up, just the way we try to build, and it's the idea that the platforms should be loyal about how they rank, de-rank, evaluate and promote or not content, and they should make the extra effort to promote quality content, maybe from public service media, whatever, at the fore. It is going to become law. Maybe a soft law, whatever. The platforms are listening because they know that, and these people, remember I told you about being at Stanford, these people are parents too. They do believe in freedom of information for good. I hate Zuckerberg, but Zuckerberg will tell you he loves democracy. Anyway, so you have to play on this belief and talk with them as well. And that's how we can keep progressing. But it means states. It means consumers who understand that they have a role to play and that they can push the platform, talk to them directly, they will listen, talk to their decision makers, and have a regulation where that works. So I think that's the future for us. the civilizing, the taming of the algorithms in a way, is making sure that they continue doing their job, but they are actually weighted or retro-engineered, retrofitted to promote more important, more information quality content. And it can be done because I remember the first time we talked about that to, I think it was Facebook. You know how Facebook has this wonderful algorithm that says if you like this, then you like that, and they'll make 3 or 4 suggestions. We asked them to make 2 free suggestions in the same line as what they like, and one that was the reverse. And they could program that. So suddenly presenting people with content they would never go to, that says the reverse of what. So when you start telling them back, the feedback loop that I was telling you about, but why it's important to keep dialoguing with them, even if they make mistakes, it's also saying there are also opportunities. And so you guys like you will listen, and you'll think about a line of code that suddenly will solve that. See what I mean? So not being caricatures of what we think they are, and keep the dialogue, keep the open door, even though we know they are commercial, they want to make money, and if you don't keep watching on them, they'll fall back on the bad habits. But you have to keep...
If I may add also to what you said about discoverability, point 1, and money, point 2. Discoverability, point 1, is an interesting point because when we give the example of Russia Today and CGTN, we actually don't know if there is a responsibility of if someone, we don't say that someone decided to, but the thing is, it happened. And what we realized also when we lead this investigation was we asked ourselves the question of what were the other medias in Belgium talking about Russia on YouTube. We had 1 video of the RTBF. There is, my point is, I indeed agree with you that engaging content is going to be more promoted, and the more content is viewed, the more it is going to be viewed. So, in my opinion, there is also a big need for public service media, or in a broader perspective, quality journalism, to be there, to be present on platform, to have to occupy the field where those, I would say, in brackets, bad actors are. And the second point is money, because why are there disinformation videos? Why are there disinformation content? Because it's profitable. So there is also work to do to demonetize that kind of people. And if they go, for example, on YouTube and they have advertisement on their video, they earn money from displaying disinformation. Why would they stop?
And for that you get an answer? Or?
Sorry?
For that you get an answer from Google? Or from
no, we didn't.
Because that's not precise.
We didn't. And I have to precise that Google didn't say that they don't know how the algorithm works. They just send us to blog posts, but they just shared documentation. Okay. They didn't make any declaration, but they just shared public documentation.
Thank you.
What other questions do we have? We've got a quarter of an hour.
There's another conference at 5.
No, I think we have until 5:15.
That's not what.
No, that was starts at 5 o'clock. I thought we had until 5:15.
That's not what I have on the brief, but we can verify.
One quick last question.
Yeah.
Where is the kit available?
Crossover.social.
Okay.
Crossover.social. CROSSOVER.SOCI.
And in answer to your question also, this is part of what the the digital, the DSA and the DMA, the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act, are also trying to grapple with. Algorithm transparency and reduction in behavioral data collection. Thank you so much to our speakers. I'm sorry we've run out of time. And I wish you much luck.